everybody, I'm Samurai Sam. This is the first of what's probably going to be a few Super Nintendo episodes. It's my favorite console, and it's the console I have the most games for, so there's a lot of them. A lot to talk about, a lot to get through. I'm going to try to get through all the loose English cartridges that I have in one episode, so try not to waste too much time. Let's start with Addams Family Values. This is obviously a game based on Addams Family. I think Addams Family Values was a movie, I'm not sure. But basically, you control Uncle Fester, and it's actually a Zelda-ish game. The biggest problem with this game is that the password system is way too long, and there really, really should have been a save battery in here instead of a password system for this type of game. But I guess emulators are a thing. You can use save states. Batman Returns, which is a cool beat-em-up, arcade-style beat-em-up with some really good music. The biggest downfall of this game is that it's only one player, and beat-em-ups are games that you really want to play two players. Speaking of which, there's Battletoads and Double Dragon, which is a crossover between Battletoads and Double Dragon. Possibly my favorite. As of right now, this is my favorite game in the Battletoads and Double Dragon series. Like, either of them. And it's not just beat-em-up levels, too. There's some variety in here. There's like an asteroids-style shooting level and stuff. And also a Turbo Tunnel-ish level, if you know what the original Battletoads is. But really well done, good music and everything, solid gameplay. Speaking of Battletoads, here's Battletoads and Battlemaniacs, which is kind of like, it's not quite a remake of the first one, but it's kind of inspired by the first one. It's kind of like the same thing that Castlevania 4, which we'll get to. It's kind of the same deal, I think. But this is probably a little less brutal than the NES game. Still pretty difficult. A lot of variety in this game. Like, the first level is all beat 'em up, and then the rest of the game kind of isn't. That one's two-player. Yeah, just like Double Dragon, it's also two-player. Biker Mice from Mars. This is actually a licensed game. Biker Mice from Mars was like a TV show. I've never ever seen it, but this is like a cool isometric racing game. And come on, you gotta just love that title, Biker Mice from Mars. How do you not want that game? Here's Bill Laimbeer's Combat Basketball. I almost said college basketball. This is a game that most people absolutely hate, but I grew up with this game, and granted, partially because of nostalgia, but also it's my opinion that this isn't quite as terrible as people say it is. It has a lot of problems. The biggest problem is that most of the controls everything is set to one button instead of like using different buttons for different things. That's pretty annoying. But I like the gameplay, and I like the concept of like having non-traditional basketball with like traps and stuff that you can, and like being able to just like knock players over and stuff with no penalties. I kind of like that sort of thing. So I think it's an okay game, just not. It's not like one of the worst. There's a lot worse on the Super Nintendo, in my opinion. Biometal. This is a shoot 'em up, and one thing that's interesting about this game is that for the US release, they replaced the soundtrack with techno music that was popular at the time. And so, if you're about my age and you fire this up, you're probably going to recognize the music, which is kind of funny. Japanese version has a completely different soundtrack. We have Blackthorn, which is one of those platformers that's kind of Prince of Persia style, where like the controls are purposefully stiff, like you can't move your character around that easy. It's kind of hard to describe if you haven't played one, but you have to be like very precise about how you move and when and stuff. But like, yeah, you have a gun, and like you can get all kinds of items and weapons and stuff to try to get through the levels, and it's pretty tough from what I remember. I actually played this as a kid. I was never able to beat it. I should try and beat it someday. But it's a pretty good game. It's made by Blizzard, by the way, an early Blizzard game. Pretty cool. Boxing Legends of the Ring. This is a boxing game, obviously. Unlike Punch-Out, this is much more like real boxing. And so I've heard this one's good. I haven't played it very much. I'll be interested to see if I can get into it. You've got Brunswick World Tournament of Champions. This is a bowling game I've had since I was a kid. There's actually only 2 bowling games on the Super Nintendo, and I had them both as a kid, which is funny. I had no idea until fairly recently that I had the only 2. But yeah, I mean, it's a pro bowling game, and it has like the famous pro bowlers from that time. And it's got a few different modes and stuff, and solid. Not like anything amazing. Probably not worth checking out right now, today. But you know, it's solid for what it is. Bubsy in Claws Encounters of the Third Kind. This is kind of a famous game. Bubsy is a platformer that's kind of sort of like Sonic the Hedgehog, but well known for like just being really silly. And Bubsy is a very talkative mascot. This is a game with a lot of voice acting, with Bubsy having his very cartoony, silly voice and making quips and wisecracks all the time. And this game's like considered okay. Some people really don't like it. Some people do like it. It's not a great game, but it's amusing and notable, and to me worth having. Tiny Toon Adventures Buster Busts Loose. This is Konami doing a pretty good job with the Tiny Toons license. It's a platformer with some, mini games and stuff thrown in there. And it's got an interesting mechanic with the dash meter. We have Championship Soccer 94, which I believe is part of the Sensible Soccer series, which, as it's known, I think they're outside of the U.S. it's definitely known as Sensible Soccer. We might have had some Sensible Soccer games with that title in the U.S. as well, but I watched a video by SNES Drunk of all the soccer games on the system, and this is one of the ones he recommended, so that's why I picked it up for nice and cheap. We have Claymates. This is a 2D platformer where you control like a blob of clay, and you can turn into different animals and different abilities and stuff. Soundtrack's pretty good. There's no save or password, I don't think, here, which is kind of annoying, but seems like a good game. I'll probably dedicate an afternoon to it at some point. Congo's Caper. This is part of the Joe and Max series, which we'll get to a little later. Kind of a prehistory themed caveman kid or cave kid, platformer where you hit things with a club or whatever, and it's a platformer from the 16-bit era. You kind of know what to expect. I haven't played too much of it, so I can't say too much as to what sets it apart, but it seems like a pretty solid game. Contra 3: The Alien Wars. Fantastic game by Konami, as usual with the Contra series. Run and gun action. Challenging, fun, good music, good controls, great multiplayer. Highly recommended. We've got Cool Spot, which again is a platformer with that mascot from 7-Up. I really don't have much else more to say about it. I already showed you the Game Gear one. Oh, I forgot to shut off. Shut up, Navi. I forgot to shut that off again. You need to remember to do that. Cybernator. This is a mech action game by Konami, side-scroller. Unfortunately, a lot of the storyline was cut out from the US release or something like that. And there is actually an English patch for the Japanese version with the story intact. But still, this is a solid game. I haven't played it too much, but I know it's a good one. We have The Jungle Book, which is a platformer that is good for people who like The Jungle Book, obviously. Earth Defense Force. It's a shoot 'em up. You get a lot of different weapons you can choose from at the start of a game. So some good gameplay variety and replay value here. I haven't played it enough to give a solid opinion as to how good of a shoot 'em up it is. I know it's not considered a really great game, but it seems pretty solid from what I've played. Now a big one. We have Earthbound. I used to have this in the box, and now I don't, sadly. It's a famous game, RPG, well known because the main character Ness is in all the Smash Brothers games. It's kind of takes the Dragon Warrior style RPG formula and puts it in a more contemporary setting with a lot of craziness and humor and interesting characters and settings, and very memorable game. It's kind of one you either love or hate. If the humor and the quirkiness doesn't do anything for you, then you're probably not going to like it that much. But the people who like Earthbound really, really love Earthbound. Earthworm Jim, a popular game from back then, platformer. Then the Genesis version is considered better usually, but the Super Nintendo version is pretty solid in its own right. It's kind of silly. It's got a lot of humor and silly level names and stuff. And you have a gun, and you can whip your head, take your head out of your suit because you're an earthworm, and whip it at people, which is kind of funny. Interesting game. Yeah, Family Feud, which is Family Food. If you've seen the game show, you kind of know how this works, and this is a pretty good version of it. That's all I really have to say about that, I guess. Firepower 2000. This is kind of like a shmup, but you have a tank instead of the usual ship, and can't say too much about it because I haven't played it a whole lot. We've got Frogger. This is the last regular Super Nintendo game released in stores. And this is known for being a pretty lazy port of Frogger. It's pretty bare bones, not a lot of variety, and no music, which is weird. It's still playable, you can still have fun with it because it's Frogger, but it's a pretty plain version of Frogger. Home Improvement. Honestly, I have this game mostly just because it's hilarious. Home Improvement was a sitcom in the 90s with Tim Allen, as you can see there on the cover. And this is a platformer that's very, they're in settings, I think, that weren't even ever done in the show or anything. The first level you're in a dinosaur world or something, which is ridiculous, I think. But yeah, I just think this game's kind of hilarious. Jack Nicklaus Golf. This is a game from my childhood, one of the first games I ever played, and it's a pretty stale golf game. It's anything really to write home about with it. But I have played it a lot. I mean, it's a serviceable golf game, but there's not really a reason to play that with many other better golf games out there. Jeopardy, which is the game show Jeopardy. I actually haven't really played this version very much. Well, actually, I did play it once. Yeah, I did play with a friend once for a little, somewhat extended period of time, and it's a pretty solid version of Jeopardy, if I remember right. You have Joe and Mac, which is actually quite different than the arcade game that it's based off of. Cartridge is in bad shape. But 2D platforming, caveman action, up to 2 players at once, which is cool. Not that common from back then. And you can get a bunch of different power-ups. And it's not like the best or most polished platformer in the world, but it's pretty solid. And what is better than that is Drone Mac 2 Lost in the Tropics, which is a little less. I don't know how to describe it. It's more of a like tailored for the home experience rather than being arcadey. It's got like villages and stuff, and I think you can buy stuff. I haven't played this game a whole lot, but it seems very promising from what I have played, and I look forward to playing it more at some point. Ken Griffey Jr.'s Winning Run. This is considered one of the best baseball games on the system. It's got like good. I think it's from the same people that did Donkey. I think this is a Rare game. I think this is from the people who did Donkey Kong Country. I could be wrong about that, but I think it like uses the same graphics engine or something, and has pretty impressive looking graphics for a late Super Nintendo game. Killer Instinct. This is a fighting game. It had really impressive 3D graphics at the time when it was first released, and they obviously had to downgrade it a lot for the Super Nintendo version, but they did it really well. They really captured the look of the arcade game pretty well, all things considered, and the gameplay is intact. It's a fun game with a unique combo system and good music and atmosphere, kind of like a creepy-ish atmosphere. It's pretty cool and cool characters. Good game, for sure. Kirby's Dream Land 3 is one of the last games Nintendo ever made on the console, and most people prefer Superstar, but I actually think I prefer Dream Land 3. In this game, every level has like some kind of a objective that like you have to like make a character happy by bringing them something or doing something for them, or like you have to win a mini game or something, and I enjoy that. And there's no text in the game. You kind of have to figure everything out just from like the things, like the characters and the symbols and the pictures or whatever. It's got a really unique kind of like colored pencil graphic styles, kind of, and I like it. I dig Kirby's Dream Land 3 a lot. Knights of the Round, which is a beat 'em up from Capcom, and it's one of the best beat 'em ups on the system, I believe. I haven't played it too much, but I know it's a good one. Madden 98. This is, obviously, most people know Madden. I mean, Madden's been going on forever, and this is, I just felt like I had to have a Madden game for the Super Nintendo. I mean, they're pretty solid football games, some of the best on the system, and so I got the latest one. Mario Paint. This is, back then, before the days of Photoshop, was a really fun tool. You use the Super Nintendo mouse, and like you can make drawings and stuff, and even music, which is cool. And it also has a really fun fly swatting minigame, which is the main reason to go back to it today. Not a whole lot of reason to go back to it now that we have much better photo editing software, but there's like a certain charm to this game that a lot of people will enjoy. Maui Mallard in Cold Shadow. This is a licensed game. That's actually Daffy Duck in some kind of a disguise, and it's a good platformer, and it's got impressive graphics and music, I believe, from what I've seen of it. I haven't played it too much. I actually haven't had this too long, but it seems like a cool game. Mega Man 7. This was the first mainline Mega Man game that wasn't on NES, and I think it's quite good. And it's a lot of secrets, more than the NES games, I think. And I dig the music, I dig the gameplay, and yeah, I mean, if you've played Mega Man, you kind of know the deal. There's different Robot Masters, and you beat them in a non-linear order, and you can get their abilities, and it's a lot of fun. Mega Man X2 is kind of a weird order because I have Mega Man X in the box, so I'm getting to the X2 and X3 first. But Mega Man X2, I think, is my favorite Mega Man X game, probably. It felt really solid to me. Not like the least cheap, I guess, of all of them, maybe. But like some interesting gameplay and levels and stuff. And I guess I'll describe more of the gameplay of Mega Man X when I get to Mega Man X. But basically, like Mega Man X, and now we're going to get to Mega Man X3. Mega Man X like takes the original NES formula and puts more emphasis on finding power-ups in the levels and growing gradually stronger. And the Robot Masters are now like based on animals, which are cool. And Mega Man X3 is kind of known for being the most difficult of the X games, I believe. Part of it is you have to know what order to go in, but yeah, this game is pretty tough. I've beaten it on the Super Nintendo and on the Sega Saturn, and I do definitely like Mega Man X3, although it's not my favorite in the series. Michael Jordan, Chaos in the Windy City. Interesting game here. This is kind of like, I think this is kind of like a Metroid-style game, believe it or not, with Michael Jordan, of all people. And like you use a basketball to like attack people. I really need it. I don't know if I can turn it off now that I'm already recorded. Yeah, it seems like a very interesting game. Micro Machines, the series from Codemasters, top-down racing action. This is a remake of the NES game, and a lot of fun. I think it's up to 4 players. Definitely recommend it if you enjoy racing games. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. I never really liked Power Rangers, but this game is actually quite good. It's a side-scrolling action game, and solid music, good use of the license, and solid gameplay. Not like one of the best Super Nintendo games, but solid. MLBPA Baseball, I have this because I had this when I was a kid, and it's not the best baseball game in the world, but, it's serviceable. Fielding is kind of hard because you don't get a lot of, screen to work with, and, but hitting, I think, if I remember right, is also pretty difficult. Not really worth it, honestly. There are better baseball games on the system. Mortal Kombat. So Mortal Kombat was a really big deal when it first came out. I've already talked a little bit about the Genesis version. This Super Nintendo version has stiffer controls and does not have blood. So this is often considered the worst version. But it does have better graphics and music. I kind of have a soft spot for this version because this is the version I played when I was young and kind of introduced me to the series. And I'm kind of used to the stiff controls. I kind of know how to deal with them. But yeah, admittedly, it's not the version of the game you really want to be playing optimally. Mortal Kombat 2. And this, they put the whole no violence thing right out the window. Mortal Kombat 2 has all the blood and gore and fatalities from the arcade version. This is quite a good port of the arcade, considering the Super Nintendo's limits. Definitely the arcade version is better, but the game was well preserved on the Super Nintendo. Now we have Mortal Kombat 3, which is more of this. I mean, it's you know Mortal Kombat. I've described Mortal Kombat to you, but this game took the formula and added combos. So you can run up to someone and mash a few buttons in succession to do a lot of damage, and very different setting from the previous game. And this is the only Mortal Kombat game to this day that doesn't have Scorpion in it, which is kind of weird. But Mortal Kombat 3 is a good game. I think, in my opinion, it is. Definitely the arcade version is a lot better than the Super Nintendo one. But the Super Nintendo version is kind of interesting because it has some cheat codes that aren't in the other versions. NBA Give and Go is a basketball game from Konami, and it's got pretty large sprites and interesting perspective. I've heard it's very good. I haven't played it very much. So yeah, unfortunately I can't say too much about it. But it does have the NBA license, and I think it has the players and stuff. Now we got to a big one. We got NBA Jam, which is an arcade game. Obviously one of the most popular arcade games of all time, and kind of a non-traditional 2-on-2 basketball game. A lot of fun. Super Nintendo version is very good, but it doesn't have music during gameplay, which is a little disappointing, but it's still a serviceable port. NBA Live 95. NBA Live is probably one of the best basketball series from that era, and this seems like a pretty good version of it. You can play up to 5 players, I think, with the multi-tap, which actually, I bought this, the person I bought my multi-tap from had this game with, I'm saying this very poorly, but it came with the multi-tap I bought, that's what I'm saying. So that's part of why I have it. NCAA Basketball, this is another game from when I was a kid, and I like this game. There's no crowd for some reason, outside of the court it's all blue. I think it's graphical reasons, it uses mode 7 to render the court and players and stuff. It looks pretty cool, and yeah, you can do a season and such, and then obviously the Final Four, and I think it's pretty well done. NFL Quarterback Club 96. I played this game a lot when I was young, and one cool thing about this game is that it has historical games that you can play. So you can take the ball in the middle of a famous game and play to your own outcome, or you're trying to win, coming back from a certain deficit or whatever, and it's cool. The main thing with this game is that its offense is very, very dominant, and there's one particular pass that I like to do that almost always works. Fake punt almost always works against the computer. Sometimes when you play old football games like this, you find exploits. But this is I like the presentation of this game too. I think this is one of the better football games on the system. NHL 94, as I've said on the Genesis, is considered one of the best hockey games of all time on the Genesis. Super Nintendo version is considered not as good, but still, it's still probably the best hockey game on the system. It's still very solid in its own right. Ninja Warriors is kind of like a beat 'em up from Taito, but it's not it's a beat 'em up that's on one plane rather than moving up and down. Kind of. I can't say too much about it, but it's a cool game. It's got a lot of style, and it's actually getting remade on the Switch one of these days, very soon, which is kind of neat. Out to Lunch is kind of an arcade-style game where you go up and down these vertical levels, and I believe, and you try to defeat all the enemies, if I remember right. And I think there's no saves or passwords, which is unfortunate. Or might be passwords. I don't remember. But cute little game. Pack Attack is actually a puzzle game, kind of Tetris-y style puzzle game, where there's ghosts in the blocks that fall down, and sometimes you'll get a Pac-Man in the blocks that fall down, and the Pac-Man eats the ghosts. And it's a good 2-player game. Surprisingly, this actually wasn't originally a Pac-Man game. They slapped Pac-Man onto it, but you would never know because it seems so natural for Pac-Man to be in this. The puzzle mode is cool, where you have to solve a puzzle in a certain number of moves. But what sucks about it is that the pieces you get in when you're playing puzzle mode are random. So you might be stuck in a situation where you literally can't possibly solve the puzzle, which is not that big of a deal because none of them are long, but it's just kind of annoying. Like, why would they do that? Phalanx. This is a shoot 'em up, and it's kind of famous for having a really, really weird cover, which the developers did on purpose. And I can't say too much about its merits as a shoot 'em up, but I did have to have it because of the cover. A friend of mine had it for trade, so I took it off his hands. Figured why not. Phantom 2040, I believe this is like a Metroid-style game, and I think this is another one that could have benefited from battery backup, if I remember right, but only has passwords, I think. But considered a solid game, kind of a little bit of a hidden gem. I don't think too many people know about it. Plok is a game I have mixed feelings about. It's got some really good music, and the gameplay seems like it would be pretty solid, but two main problems is there's a lot of trial and error gameplay to Plok, like enemies that just come out of nowhere that you had no chance of knowing they were there. The biggest issue, though, is there's no saves or passwords, and it's a pretty long game, so that really sucks. You kind of have to have a lot of spare time on your hands if you really want to take a serious shot at beating it, which I've never done. Pocky and Rocky, this is a very, very good game. Top-down, shoot 'em up kind of. It's not really a shoot 'em up per se, but it's one of those twin stick shooters like Smash TV, where like you're an overhead view, and well, if in the arcade you would be able to like use a second joystick to shoot in a certain direction while moving in a different direction. Theoretically, actually, Pocky and Rocky wasn't in arcades, but that's the type of game this is, and you can get power-ups and you can like do an evasive slide and stuff. Very fun game and challenging. It could have benefited from some kind of a twin stick control setup though, but as it is, it's still very fun with a very Japanese vibe and setting, obviously, and good two-player game. Definitely a winner. And then there's Pocky and Rocky 2, which changes things a little bit from the first game. It takes away the evasive slide, which is kind of weird. But like it has this new partner system where there's a few different characters you can get as your partner, even if you're not playing with a second player, and like you can utilize their abilities and actually throw them at people, and like they'll explode and stuff, and it's weird. But Pocky Rocky 2 is also a lot of fun. I think the first one is probably a little better, but they're both very good games. Pro Quarterback. This is a game that I had when I was a kid, and this is honestly an absolutely horrible football game. Like one of the worst frame rates you've ever seen. Like terrible gameplay. And the fake field goal is, for some reason, really overpowered. Like, even if you're in a situation where you would never kick a field goal, it seems to always work and get you a ton of yards. This game is a piece of garbage. But I like it because I have nostalgia for it, and it's amusingly bad. R-Type 3, this is, R-Type is a famous shoot-'em-up series that's famous for having this little thing that you can shoot, this little, like, I guess you'd call it an option, or like a little... I don't even know how to describe it. There's this little ball that you have that's like attached to your ship sometimes, but you can propel it off your ship and it'll shoot independently, and it's cool. And R-Type 3 is considered one of the better, considered a quality R-Type game, and one of the better shoot-'em-ups on the Super Nintendo, and it's quite difficult as well, but, that kind of comes with the genre most of the time. Relief Pitcher, this is a port of an arcade game, actually, and it has the famous announcer Jack Buck doing the play-by-play. And I used to play this in arcades with my dad, so that's why I have this. And it doesn't seem to be like really that great of a baseball game, but it's got like its own distinct graphical style, and I like the Jack Buck play-by-play a little bit, even though it's not really that great, but it's kind of neat. And you can do like a season where you keep like taking control of late games where you have to like come from behind in the ninth or win in extra innings and stuff, which is very different. I don't think I've seen many games do that. Saturday Night Slam Monsters, which is like a non-traditional wrestling game from Capcom, and it has Hagar from Final Fight in it, which is neat. I haven't played it too much, but seems like a cool game. I forget if this is multi-tap compatible or not. It might be. Another rather infamous game is Shaq Fu. I've already talked about it on the Sega Genesis. But, considered one of... a lot of people think this is one of the worst games on the Super Nintendo. It is bad, but it's not like the worst game on the Super Nintendo. It's a fighting game with stiff controls, and it has Shaquille O'Neal, which is amusing, and a bunch of different random fictional characters that are never in anything else. Kind of an obscure game here called Shion's Revenge. This is a game you actually play with the mouse, and it's kind of a light gun sort of game, only you don't use a gun, you use the mouse. And there's kind of an emphasis on defense here, like blocking attacks, and it's really intriguing, and I want to play more of it at some point. Skyblazer is a pretty cool platformer where you play as, I think you play as like an angel kind of dude, if I remember right. I can't remember exactly like how to describe it. I haven't played it a lot, but one of those that's kind of been like one of those games I feel like I'm about to play sometime pretty soon. Seems very cool and action platformer kind of game. And I think there's a password system and no battery save. And we have Smart Ball. This is a game that was altered a lot from the Japanese version. There was like a more story in it and stuff. But Smart Ball is an early Super Nintendo game. It's a platformer. You play as this blob, and you can like grab like rocks and stuff to throw at enemies and such. And it's got kind of like a happy, colorful, fun music and atmosphere. And it seems like a cool little game. And I think you have to beat it all in one sitting. I don't think there are saves and passwords. SOS is a rather unique game where like you're on a submarine and it's gonna sink or something, and it's like a platformer and you have to go around the submarine, and I think you rescue people or something, and I think that might like affect the ending, but don't quote me on that, because like, you know, one of those games I've heard about but I haven't really played, so the details might have left me, but it seems like a very cool and unique game in the Super Nintendo library. We have Spawn, which is a 2D action game based on the comic series, and it seems like it's a well done game that represents the license well. I'll have to play it at some point and get my own opinion. Stunt Race FX is a game to show off the Super FX chip, and so the graphics are not nearly as impressive as they were back then, obviously, but this game has a lot of personality that does age well, and it's a pretty amusing game, and I will be looking forward to playing it some when I get around to it. See, obviously I have a lot of games to play. Super Adventure Island, this is, we've already talked about the NES Adventure Island games, you know, the platformers where you move forward and you want to eat fruit in order to keep going, because otherwise you'll run out and die of starvation, I guess. And I'm not sure where this is considered among the series. I don't think this is considered like one of the best games in the series, but I really like the music in this one in particular. Super Baseball 2020, this is a SNK baseball game. And not quite as good as the arcade version. There's some stuff missing from this version, like grenades on the field or something. But a very weird, non-traditional baseball game, but cool. I like it. Super Baseball Simulator 1000. We've talked about the first one on the NES. It's a game where plays a lot like RBI Baseball, like a lot of games back then did. And you can get, like, I think, like, crazy power-ups that are, like, really unrealistic to make your characters, like, super powerful or something. Kind of neat. Super Bomberman 2. I think this is the first Bomberman game we've gotten to. No, we got to one on Game Boy, I think. Bomberman games are famous for their local multiplayer, and this is multi-tap compatible. A lot of fun when you have like 4 or 5 friends. And the single player is probably not all that great, but maybe it is okay. I have to try it out sometime. Super Bowling, another game from my childhood. Kind of a cartoony bowling game. Not really any kind of a single-player campaign to speak of. There's not a lot of content to this game. The thing that stands out in this game is golf mode, where the game gives you like some kind of a split and you have to clear it in a certain number of balls, which is unique and cool. Otherwise, it just has regular bowling. I like the game, it's just I wish there was more to it. Super Bases Loaded, which is a game that involves playing baseball and playing the best, most clean game of baseball, clean of mistakes that you can play. I'm not sure how good it is in practice, but it seems like an intriguing concept to me, so that's part of why I have it. If you haven't noticed, I like baseball. Super Bonk. This is, Bonk was the mascot of the TurboGrafx 16/PC engine, but Super Nintendo got one of his games anyway. This is actually an exclusive game in the box series, I believe. Bonk games are very, very silly, and like you get all these power-ups and Bonk just like goes crazy and like transforms into like a chicken or a giant or something weird, and he bonks enemies with his head. That's hence the name. And a cool game. I definitely want to spend more time with it. Super Buster Brothers, also known as Super Pang, I believe. This is a game where it's an arcade-style game, and there's like bubbles falling from the ceiling, and you have to shoot them all before they hit you in order to progress. And the game is pretty tough, I believe. But it's also 2-player, I think, and it's a fun game. Super Ghouls and Ghosts. I already talked about Ghosts and Goblins and regular Ghouls and Ghosts on Genesis. Capcom platformer, action platformer, very, very difficult, kind of trial and error-ish gameplay, but well made though. This one in particular is well made and considered a good game. Super High Impact. I believe this is Midway. I think this is a arcadey football game, and actually this is one of the first times I remember even like witnessing football, the sport, was playing this game, and I remember playing it before I even knew the rules and stuff. But the coolest thing about this game is that the characters trash talk each other, and it's really hilarious and fun. Super Mario All Stars with Super Mario World. I'll talk about these games individually when I get to them. This is just a compilation of the two, with the main difference being Luigi's sprite in Super Mario World is now unique, which is neat. Super Mario World, the first game I ever played, one of the best platformers of all time, and it takes the Mario formula and makes it a little more non-linear. I mean, Mario Brothers 3 already was kind of non-linear, but like the levels in this one have like multiple exits, and like you can get to them to like unlock new paths to new levels and stuff. And you have Yoshi in this game, and it's just so much fun. Super Mario World is great. I mean, I'm not going to say too much more than that because you already know Super Mario World. Of course you do. Everybody's played Super Mario World. It's great. Super Scope 6. Super Scope was a gun accessory for the Super Nintendo put out by Nintendo, it's kind of like a bazooka, honestly. And this it's called Super Scope 6, say that 10 times fast, because it has 6 games on it. And it seems like a okay use of the Super Scope. Probably not the best use, but it's alright. Super R-Type, which is definitely not as good as R-Type 3, and I believe it's very slow, has a lot of slowdown, and I think it's okay, but like not that great. Super Smash TV, this is arguably the best version of Smash TV that exists. It has like a turbo mode that speeds up the gameplay, which is pretty fun. It's still just as unfair, I believe, as the arcade version, which is kind of annoying, but it's a very cool game. I keep comparing games to Super Smash TV. So, like, it's a top-down game, like, you're from an overhead view, and you're, like, walking around in a room, you have a gun, and enemies come in by the swarm, and you have to shoot them all to beat each level, and, like, there's branching paths and stuff, and it's cool. Super Star Wars, we'll talk more about this trilogy when I get to the other two, because those are the other two I played a lot more when I was a kid. But Super Star Wars is a cool game that uses the license well, but it's got some flaws and some really cheap moments, and definitely not as good as the next two, but we'll get to those. Super Turrican is a game in the long-running Turrican... Well, I don't know how long it ran, but like Turrican series had a following back then. I think it started on the Amiga or something. And I believe this game is actually missing some content that was in the original game that this is a port of, unfortunately, but it's still a good game. Then there's Super Turrican 2, which has some very impressive graphics for the Super Nintendo, and it seems to have some neat gameplay too. I haven't played it too much, but I plan to. Tecmo Super Bowl 3, a lot of people forget that Tecmo Super Bowl had sequels. This, I believe this is a very good game, and like possibly even better than the original Tecmo Super Bowl, I believe, but I haven't actually played for myself yet. Tetris and Dr. Mario. This is a game that doesn't get talked about too much, but it's a 16-bit port of Tetris and Dr. Mario on the NES with spruced up graphics and music, and I like it a lot because I like those games, and it's cool to see them in 16-bit. The Great Circus Mystery, Capcom platformer starring the Disney characters here, and I really like this game a lot. I think the graphics and music are excellent, and the gameplay. Main problem is just way too short. Like, I felt like, man, it was just over way too quick. I feel like this would be like one of the best games on the Super Nintendo if it was longer. Lion King, talked about this on Genesis already. Good use of the license. Not the best game in the world, but if you like Lion King, you'll definitely enjoy that. Thunder Spirits, this is part of the Thunder Force series, which is mostly on the Genesis. This is a port, I believe, of Thunder Force AC arcade, and it's alright. Not the best Thunder Force game, but seems to be solid to me. Tin Star is a game where you can use the controller, mouse, or Super Scope, and you play as like a dude and you shoot things. And it's very cartoony and silly and a lot of like funny sound effects. And I definitely want to play more of it at some point. Top Gear is a racing game, and I played some of it recently, and I thought it was all right, but like not that great. Probably you can do better now. There's probably better racing games now, so it's probably kind of obsolete. TMNT Tournament Fighters. This is a Street Fighter style game. You know, Konami really didn't make that many 2D fighters. Kind of surprising, but this is one that they did make, and yeah, it's good. Even if you don't like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but if you do like Street Fighter, you can enjoy that game. Speaking of which, oh wait, no, never mind. Wrong thing. But True Lies, this is a Arnold Schwarzenegger movie game, and it's kind of an overhead, I don't want to call it a running gun, but it's like, you know, a shooter. Like a game where you walk around and shoot people. It's not like a scrolling shoot 'em up, or a shoot 'em up. I'm doing it wrong, but seems like a pretty good game. I've never seen the movie, but like seems like an actual game worth playing, even if you didn't see the movie. This is the game I was about to talk about. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 4: Turtles in Time. This is arguably the best beat 'em up ever made, even if you don't like the Ninja Turtles that much. You know, just really solid gameplay. Like it doesn't get stale like a lot of beat 'em ups do, and it's good multiplayer. Just a really, really fantastic game. Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, you've already talked about the first 3 Mortal Kombats. This takes Mortal Kombat 3 and adds a lot of content to it, including Scorpion, which was missing from Mortal Kombat 3. And very good game. Not the best version of it, but it has some exclusive cheats, so that's kind of neat. UN Squadron, this is an early shoot 'em up on the Super Nintendo. This is actually a licensed game based on an anime called Area 88, and you can buy all kinds of like upgrades and stuff for your ship, which is cool. Considered a good game. I haven't played it too much. Wacky Sports Challenge by Konami. This is, you play as the Tiny Toons, and you play a bunch of like, I don't think you play a lot of like regular sports. It's more like Olympic style sports, I think. And yeah, it seems like a neat little game. Probably fun multiplayer, but I haven't really had the chance to do that yet. Wario's Woods, which is kind of a little more complicated than the regular puzzle game that you would expect, but you play as Toad and you like move these things around and try to match them up and stuff. Ooh, I like this game a lot. Wild Guns, this is one of my favorite co-op games in general. Basically, it's kind of like a gallery shooter where like you have a crosshair and like you're trying to shoot everything that all the enemies that come up, but you also control a character that you move around and you need to dodge bullets with them and stuff. And it's just so much fun. I never really get tired of it. It's not a terribly long game, but I never really get tired of it though. I always enjoy going back to it. And this is better than the remake that actually came out on the PS4 and the Switch. It's definitely high quality Super Nintendo game right there. X-Men Mutant Apocalypse, this is kind of like a side-scrolling beat-em-up. And seems like a good use of the license. I haven't played it too much, but by Capcom, again, Capcom usually did a good job with licensed games. X-Zone, which is, or Cross Zone, I don't know how to pronounce it, but this is a Super Soap game. I can't say too much about it other than that. I definitely do want to play it some more, though. I say that a lot. That's what happens when you have a lot of game. Yoshi's Cookie, we talked about this on NES. It's a game where like there's like these squares-shaped series of cookies, and you need to like move the rows and columns all together so that they match. And not one of the best puzzle games, but it's pretty solid. And then finally we have Yoshi's Safari, which is a Super Scope game where you ride on Yoshi's back and shoot all kinds of enemies, like Bowser and his minions in the Mushroom Kingdom. And it seems like a cool game. This is actually the first game ever in America where Princess Toadstool was called Peach. And I haven't beaten it yet, but I... Shut up, Navi! You know what, Navi? I'm so mad at you, I'm going to stop the video. Yeah. Alright, so that's all the loose North American Super Nintendo games I have. Next time, I think we'll be doing boxed English Super Nintendo games, North America and Europe. But we might not get through all that in one video because it's a lot. But we'll see. I'm Samurai Sam. Thank you for joining me. See you next time.